Joining us on this morning after to put it in perspective, as well as talk about other pressing issues, Congressman Peter King of New York, a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security and the former chairman of that committee. Peter, welcome back to America's Forum at our new time. And in the wake of what transpired with Eric Cantor last night, what is your reaction?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a lot of analysis. I mean, obviously, immigration was an issue, and there was an anger toward Washington. On the other hand, you had in Idaho, which is certainly a very conservative state, Mike Simpson beat back a very concerted effort by the Tea Party about a month ago. That was a big victory for him. You had Mitch McConnell winning in Kentucky, but then you have Dad Cochran running behind in Mississippi. So I would say that it's... Again, we have to analyze it, see was it a fact that Eric had lost touch with his district, which, by the way, is not even necessarily a criticism of Eric. When you're in a national leadership position, you necessarily have to spend more time away from your district, and that is one of the hazards of aspiring to being a leader in the party, because your obligations are to travel all over the country on behalf of the party.
Well, speaking of leadership, this morning, as the House Republican Conference convenes in a meeting which is sure to take place, should Eric Cantor remain as majority leader, or with the change in his status now to lame duck, do you think he will step down and devote whatever energies he has to a transition to Dave Bratt, the victor of last night's primary?
I think that, first of all, Eric is not going to step down from the House. If he does step down as leader, that's up to him. It's where he can be most effective as to whether he stays in. I don't want to be prejudging it. It's the morning after he lost, again, a very, very tough election. I'll let Eric decide that. But I think, obviously, we're going through a transition in the party. And if Eric decides to step down, I would certainly understand that. Step down as majority leader. Then, of course, we have to decide who's going to come in, how that's done. Will that create an election within the party which will divide us more than ever? So all that has to be looked at. It's going to take a lot of sober, conscientious thinking here.
And Pete, I've been in those conference meetings with you. You and I are both a bit outspoken. What would be your druthers? What would be your desire in this situation, Pete, for Mr. Cantor as the leader?
JD, I would think Eric may well decide that, if not now, but the next few weeks, to step down, just to, again, make it easier both for him and for the party. JD, I'd be concerned about us putting in a hardline Tea Party person right now. If we could get someone who's going to basically make sure the trains run on time. I mean, apart from all of the philosophical issues and everything, the majority leader controls what happens on the House floor. We have appropriations bills we have to get done all summer. I don't want to see it, and I know that sounds like inside baseball to your average listener right now, but we have to make sure the government works. And I think if we are going to have a contested, heated election, that's best served after November. After we have Election Day out of the way, then we have November and December to go through inter-party elections. Right now, I think we have to show we're a governing party. And to do that, we have to make sure that we at least get things done over the next month, make sure we get done what we have to get done, and not tear the party apart with an inter-party election right now.
And that's an interesting point there, Congressman King. You mentioned that appropriations bill, and it is kind of in the weeds for a lot of folks right now, but there's real important spending measures in that bill that are vital to government programs, including money that's linked to the transfer of Gitmo detainees here. How do we make sure, you mentioned the important role that Eric Cantor has played, how do you guys make sure that nothing falls through the cracks?
Well, again, that's up to us. We have to be very, very careful on that because, again, there are real philosophical issues. There's very strong differences on, again, a lot of key issues. But we also have to, when you're in the majority, you have to run the place. You have to make sure that the committees get their bills done. You have to make sure the votes go to, the bills go to the floor. Make sure we get all of the bills we have to have spending on passed. And if we want to cut the spending, that's one thing. But we have to get laws passed. Otherwise, the government stops running, and then people will really lose confidence in what we're doing. So I'm not trying to run away from the tough philosophical issues. I'm just saying we have to make sure in this philosophical dispute we may be having, we don't let the government collapse. I think the best time, if we're going to have we're going to have this, these battles or these differences, honest differences, I think it's best to do it after election when we know who's been elected, who hasn't been elected, what the signals are we get from the campaign. JD, you remember back in 1998, we thought we were going to win a load of seats because of the Clinton impeachment. Fact is, we didn't, and the next thing we know, Newt Gingrich was resigning, stepping down as Speaker. No one foresaw that in July or August of that year, and yet in November, the whole House came tumbling down. So I would prefer that whatever we are going to do, that we do it after election, and right now we try to just smooth the transition as much as possible.
Well, speaking of governing, Pete, and far be it from us to say issues of governing are, quote, in the weeds, there are important issues. For example, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, the former Nebraska Republican senator, scheduled to appear before the House Armed Services Committee today, the first high-level administration member to discuss the controversial prison swap, the Taliban 5, for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, which has raised so much ire on both sides of the aisle. Peter, when Chuck Hagel sits down in front of the House Armed Services Committee, when Buck McKeon gavels that hearing into session, what do you think Secretary Hagel is likely to say today?
He's going to try to defend what the administration did. He's going to say that this was their last chance to get Bergdahl. I don't believe that. I've been at two classified one was classified and top secret on the Intelligence Committee. Another one was for all the House members at a classified level. There's been nothing said in those hearings that you have not heard publicly. There is no secret answer here. I know a number of people were saying, well, there's probably a lot that we don't know, and that's why the president did what he did. No. I would tell you right now, the American people know publicly 99% of the facts that are key to this case. There was no excuse. There's no rationale for what the president did. It was 5 terrorists for Bergdahl. Bergdahl, by all accounts, did abandon his post, and that's a decision to make. Was that a deal worth making? I say it was not. And the one thing which I think we're going to find interesting here is when you have people like John Kerry going on national television and saying there's really nothing to worry about with these 5 people, because if they step out of the line, we'll get them. We have no guarantee of that whatsoever. Qatar is very unreliable. There are no real specifics as to how they're going to be monitored. So I am very, very concerned. I have not gotten any assurances whatsoever that we have any real way of tracking what they're doing in Qatar, what those 5 terrorists are going to be doing.
Pete, about a minute and a half remains, very quickly, and then I'll let John close out the questions. Here's my point. I heard yesterday that suddenly the administration is coming up saying Chuck Hagel is the guy who made this decision. It was Chuck Hagel's decision to make. Is Hagel being made the scapegoat? Because you would have to figure the commander-in-chief made this decision, did he not?
Yes, and Chuck Hagel should watch that he's not put in that position by the administration. The only role Chuck Hagel would have had here was, I believe the defense secretary has to be one of those who signs off. But he's not going to sign off unless the President of the United States tells him to. No, this is President Obama's decision. He's the one that walked out in the Rose Garden with them, with the mother and father. So, no, this was President Obama's decision. He has to assume full responsibility for it. And all the others from the chain of command, they got their orders. And listen, Chuck Hagel may have believed he was doing the right thing, but he would not have done it unless President Obama was fully on board. And President Obama would not have tried to make a Rose Garden ceremony out of it unless he was fully behind it.
That's certainly the case there. Congressman Peter King, thanks so much for being with us. Still a lot of...
Hey, thanks a lot. Great.
It's always good to have you, sir.
Great.
And,
JD, always great talking to you.
Always good to talk to you, Petey, my old pal. We'll catch up soon.
We'll replay coming up later the soundbite from Chuck Hagel when he first addressed the Bergdahl issue. And I imagine that's what we're going to hear a lot of today, that it's too early to judge. And I will probably get a lot of that. Hopefully we'll get more answers from the Secretary of Defense, but who knows? That's going to be a